You may not always realize it, but VR, AR, and MR are used in many, many different sectors of society. The topic for this week, indeed, is how XR is used in society in different sectors. Let's look at a couple of them to start off this week. Of course, VR is used a lot in entertainment. You may know the PlayStation VR, for instance, for gaming. You might even have one yourself. And typically also this gaming industry has a lot of money to spend to develop those technologies. And other sectors can sometimes also benefit from this. Another example is the media sector. Journalists are now playing around with VR. In the past, when you consumed news items, for instance, as a news consumer, you typically did this in a newspaper, for instance, or now on websites, for instance, you read a text or a couple of pictures, or you watch TV where you see a certain news item. But of course, all this information typically is in 2D, right? Not in 3D. Now, VR allows news consumers to consume consume news in 3D. So imagine something's happening in a different part of the world. You can read about this. Of course, you can see pictures of this, videos of this. But I think VR offers a lot more impact in terms of consuming this news. So you can really be in this different place, in a different place of the world, really experiencing firsthand what people are experiencing there, really getting a very good impression of what's actually going on in a different part of the world. Tourism is another sector. So you can go to a tourism agency and already have a look at the hotel room that they're offering you if you book a holiday with them, for instance. You might want to go on holiday to a place you've never been to before. You want to experience what it's like over there. Then you can get this headset onto your head. And actually, this tourism agency can show you what it looks like in this different place in the world. Again, to convince you to book your holiday with them, because you already more or less know what things will look like, and sort of it might look nice to you or not. In real estate, architects, for instance, are using VR to already have a look at what a house that they're designing will look like in 3D before it's finished. And of course, also, if you have architects build or design a house for you, you can have a look at it before it's being built. So you can have a real good look at, for instance, how large the living room will be, whether you would like it a bit larger or not, or whether there's enough size for your couch, for instance. Education, we'll look a bit at that today. Of course, so all sorts of opportunities for education in terms of using AR, VR. You can imagine during your secondary school education, you learned about, for instance, ancient Greece. You might have looked at images of ancient Greece. You might have read about it. But what now if you can actually go to ancient Greece through VR or through AR? You can actually see what it looked like. You can walk around in Athens 2,000, 3,000 years ago. Offers all sorts of new opportunities that weren't there in the past. Vocational training, Walmart in the US is very famous for this. So many of their employees get a training in VR before they start working. You can think of people that are in contact with customers. They get some virtual customer training, how to treat customers, how to behave in their environment, how to talk to them, what to say, what not to say. This is a very nice way of training, because if something goes wrong, it doesn't really have any consequences. So virtual customers won't run away, or if they do, it doesn't matter because they can't buy anything anyway. So you can really train people in VR before they start their actual job. Healthcare is another sector. So one prominent example there is virtual therapists. So you can imagine it's not always easy to talk about, for instance, psychological problems to a therapist, to a real therapist, to a doctor, because you might feel ashamed or it might be really hard for you. What now if there are virtual therapists that don't judge, that are not actual people, to whom you can actually also tell your story and tell about the problems that you might have? This might for some people be much easier than talking to a real person in real life. Business, another sector, of course, where VR is used. For instance, Companies are now having business meetings in VR sometimes, with different people in different parts of the world coming together in one virtual environment and having their 3D meeting there that goes beyond a simple Skype or Zoom meeting. Those are still 2D, right? In VR, you can actually really be in a 3D meeting room jointly, having this spatial presence and also this social presence being there together. Also in the arts is being used, of course, many artists are making use of new technologies. They also make use of VR and AR, MR. Museums are sometimes playing around with this. And also in sports, there are all sorts of VR applications for actively doing sports. So there are, for instance, those American football teams simulating all sorts of possible match scenarios in VR, such that they are really very well prepared for an actual match, and also passive sports. You can imagine instead of going to a stadium, wearing a headset and then actually experiencing a sports match live in VR, in 3D, without actually having to go to a stadium. So those are just a couple of sectors, or actually quite a lot of sectors in society where VR, AR, MR are being used. And you might not always see this, or you might not always realize it, but I think more and more different sectors are starting to make use of this. And also once you start working, for instance, in a company, once you're done studying, in one of those sectors, you might come across VR again. And then, of course, hopefully the things you learned during this course will come in handy.